Most women think being constantly available is a form of goodness. They answer immediately, show up every time, forgive endlessly, and call it patience, love, and demand. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Islam never taught women to be endlessly accessible. When you are always available, people don't see devotion. They see entitlement. They stop adjusting for you. They stop valuing your time. They stop fearing your absence. Not because they are evil, but because human nature responds to access, not intention. And the moment your worth becomes measured by how reachable you are, you quietly lose something far more valuable: your dignity, your authority, and your connection with Allah. In Islam, sacrifice is never random, emotional, or driven by fear of people. True sacrifice is conscious, measured, and directed toward Allah alone. It has intention behind it. It has limits. It has wisdom. Constant availability, on the other hand, is usually not sacrifice at all. It is emotional. Impulsiveness wearing the mask of virtue. A woman answers immediately, not because it is necessary, but because she is afraid of disappointing. She shows up even when exhausted, not because Allah asked her to, but because guilt whispers that she must. Over time, this behavior feels righteous, but it is quietly rooted in anxiety, people-pleasing, and fear of being unloved. Islam does not reward burnout. Islam does not reward self-neglect. Your time is not meaningless. Your energy is not infinite. Your emotional capacity is not disposable. All of these are amana from Allah. You will be questioned about how you use them, not how quickly you gave them away to anyone who asked. When you exhaust yourself to remain useful, when your value becomes tied to availability, you are not practicing sabar or ihsan. You are avoiding discomfort. You are avoiding saying no. You are avoiding the fear of rejection. And Islam never told you to destroy yourself to maintain connection with creation. The Prophet lived a life of balance, and balance is not weakness. He gave to people, but he also withdrew. He served, but he also rested. He taught, but he also remained silent. He did not rush to respond to every call. He did not stretch himself thin to meet every emotional demand. He protected his energy because his mission required clarity, presence, and strength. If the most merciful of creation maintained boundaries, who convinced you that constant availability is righteousness? When you respond immediately to everyone, prioritize everyone, and make yourself endlessly accessible, you are sending an unspoken message. You are telling people that your time has no weight, that your rest is optional, that your needs are secondary. Human nature absorbs this message quickly. People adjust their behavior based on what you tolerate, not what you intend. When your presence has no cost, it loses perceived value. This is not cruelty. This is psychology. Islam does not ignore human psychology. It warns you about it. Many women confuse endurance with devotion. They think tahammul means tolerating everything. But Islam differentiates between patience and self-harm. Sabr is staying upright upon truth, not allowing yourself to be drained into emptiness. Ihsan is excellence in worship, not excellence in availability. Allah does not need you exhausted. He needs you sincere. And sincerity requires clarity, not collapse. When you give without restraint, you slowly disappear. Your identity becomes functional rather than dignified. You are needed but not cherished, relied upon but not protected. This is the hidden cost of constant availability. Islam came to preserve dignity, not erase it. A woman who honors her amana understands that not every request deserves her immediate yes. Some delays are wisdom. Some no's are obedience. And sometimes pulling back is not selfishness, but submission to the balance Allah designed. 2. Human nature devalues what is always. Accessible Islam never builds its guidance on fantasy ideas about human behavior. It speaks to reality. It acknowledges the nafs, forgetfulness, ingratitude, and emotional laziness. Allah repeatedly reminds us that human beings become heedless when blessings are constant. This applies to wealth, health, relationships, and even faith itself. So when a woman believes that being endlessly available will make people appreciate her more, she is ignoring a basic truth about human nature that Islam already warned her about. When something is always there, the mind stops registering its value. When someone is always reachable, always forgiving, always accommodating, people stop adjusting their behavior around them. They no longer protect that person's time. They no longer feel urgency to respond with respect. They no longer fear loss, not because they are intentionally cruel, but because the nafs adapts to access. Islam does not excuse this behavior, but it explains it. Wisdom means you protect yourself from predictable patterns instead of pretending they do not exist. Many women assume that if people do not value them, it means they did not give enough, so they give more. More time, more emotional labor, more forgiveness, more availability. But this actually accelerates the problem. Over-availability removes scarcity, and scarcity is what creates attentiveness. Even Allah does not give everything instantly. He delays, He withholds, He tests. If constant access increased appreciation, dua would never be delayed. But delay is part of tarbiyah. It teaches patience, awareness, and humility. Unlimited access teaches entitlement. When you are always present, people subconsciously assume you will remain so. Your effort becomes expected instead of appreciated. Your sacrifices become invisible. And when you finally pull back, they feel shocked, offended, or even betrayed. Not because you did something wrong, but because you disrupted a pattern they had grown comfortable exploiting. Islam teaches you to be intelligent with your generosity. Giving without wisdom does not make you noble. It makes you drained. This is why Islam emphasizes moderation in all things. Even acts of worship are regulated. You are not allowed to pray all night every night if it harms your body. You are not allowed to fast continuously if it weakens you. Balance is not a suggestion in Islam, it is a command. So why would emotional availability be the one area where self-destruction is praised? It is not. Culture may glorify it, Islam does not. A woman who is constantly available trains people to subconsciously downgrade her presence. They begin to assume she will always adjust, always wait, always forgive, always understand. And once that assumption is formed, respect erodes quietly. Islam protects women from this erosion by emphasizing dignity, limits, and self-worth rooted in Allah, not in usefulness to others. Understanding human nature is not cynicism, it is wisdom. The believer is not naive. She does not expose herself to predictable harm and call it virtue. She gives, but she gives with awareness. She is present, but not consumed. And by limiting her availability, she preserves not only her energy, but her value in the eyes of people, and more importantly, her alignment with the balance Allah designed. 3. Availability without boundaries. Trains people to cross limits. Islam is a religion of boundaries. Allah sets limits on what is halal and haram, when to give, when to withhold, when to speak, and when to remain silent. Boundaries are not harshness, they are protection. When a woman removes boundaries from her availability, she is not becoming more compassionate. She is becoming easier to misuse. And human beings, left unchecked, will always take more than they are given permission to take. Every time you say yes when your heart is exhausted, when your schedule is strained, or when your peace is compromised, you are silently teaching people how to treat you. People do not learn from your intentions. They learn from your patterns. If your pattern is unlimited access, they will push further. If your pattern is immediate response, they will demand speed. If your pattern is emotional absorption, they will unload without restraint. This is not because they are monsters. It is because boundaries were never established. Islam does not ask women to be endlessly accommodating. It asks them to be just. And justice includes justice to yourself. When you allow people to cross your limits repeatedly, you are not being patient. You are allowing dhulm against your own soul. The Prophet said there should be neither harm nor reciprocating harm. Harm includes emotional depletion, resentment, and loss of self. When you ignore your limits, you normalize harm under the name of goodness. Many women fear that setting boundaries makes them cold, difficult, or un-Islamic. This fear is unfounded. Allah Himself enforces boundaries without apology. He does not respond to every request immediately. He does not allow every behavior. He does not tolerate transgression. If divine mercy includes firm limits, then human mercy must also include restraint. Boundaries are not rejection. They are clarity. When availability has no limits, people stop regulating themselves. They stop considering your time. They stop noticing your fatigue. They stop asking permission emotionally. They assume access. And assumption is the doorway to disrespect. Once people believe they are entitled to you, pulling back feels offensive to them, even if it is necessary for your survival. This is why Islam teaches you to establish limits early, before entitlement takes root. A woman who understands boundaries does not explain herself excessively. She does not apologize for protecting her peace. She does not negotiate her exhaustion. She gives when she is able, and she withholds when she must. This does not reduce her worth. It increases it. People begin to approach her with more care, more awareness, and more respect because access is no longer automatic. Islamic strength is not loud. It is firm. When you align your availability with wisdom instead of guilt, you stop training people to cross your limits. You teach them how to approach you correctly. And in doing so, you protect not only your dignity, but the balance Allah intended for your life. 4. Over-availability weakens authority and presence. Islam places immense weight on presence, restraint, and intentionality. Authority in Islam is not created by dominance or loudness. It is created by composure, consistency, and self-control. When a woman is constantly available, constantly responsive, constantly explaining herself, her presence slowly loses weight. Her words become easy to dismiss. Her absence carries no consequence. And without consequence, authority cannot exist. The Prophet did not rush toward people to be heard. He did not flood others with explanations to secure approval. He spoke when speech was necessary and remained silent when silence carried more wisdom. This restraint did not distance people from him. It elevated him. When he spoke, people listened. When he withdrew, people reflected. His availability was intentional, not reactive. That is why his presence carried gravity. Over-availability creates the opposite effect. When people know you are always there, they do not adjust themselves to meet you. They assume you will adjust for them. When you answer immediately every time, your responses feel less valuable. When you are always emotionally present, your emotional labor becomes invisible. When your absence never happens, it stops being meaningful. Islam understands this dynamic deeply. Presence only carries weight when it is not guaranteed. Many women believe that being constantly available makes them reliable, but reliability without boundaries becomes predictability. And predictability without limits erodes authority. People stop preparing for you. They stop considering you. They stop fearing your withdrawal. This is not because you lack worth. It is because worth is felt through contrast. Even Allah reminds people of His power through moments of withholding and delay, not as punishment, but as reminder. Authority in Islam is not about control. It is about respect. And respect is built when others sense that your time and energy are governed by principle, not by pressure. A woman who protects her availability sends a silent message. Her life is structured, her values are clear, and her presence is intentional. People begin to approach her more carefully. They think before asking. They listen more closely when she speaks. This is not manipulation. This is natural response to self-respect. When you are always available, you also lose inner authority over yourself. Your schedule becomes reactive. Your emotions are pulled outward. Your peace is dictated by others' needs. Islam teaches mastery of the self before service to others. If you cannot regulate your availability, you cannot maintain internal balance. And without internal balance, external respect eventually collapses. A woman aligned with Islamic wisdom understands that silence can be more powerful than speech, distance can be more impactful than presence, and restraint can speak louder than constant effort. When she withdraws appropriately, she does not lose connection. She clarifies it. Her presence becomes something people notice, not something they assume. And in that shift, authority is restored, not because she demanded it, but because she earned it through self-governance. 5. Emotional availability is not an obligation to everyone. One of the most damaging lies many women internalize is the belief that being a good Muslim woman means being emotionally available to everyone at all times. They think listening endlessly, absorbing people's pain, fixing problems, and carrying emotional weight is part of righteousness. Islam never taught this. Emotional availability is not an obligation. It is a choice. And when that choice is made without wisdom, it becomes a burden that slowly erodes the soul. Islam distinguishes clearly between compassion and self-sacrifice that leads to harm. You are rewarded for kindness, but you are not commanded to become an emotional container for everyone else's chaos. Many women exhaust themselves emotionally, not because Allah asked them to, but because they fear being seen as cold, uncaring, or unhelpful. This fear pushes them to stay present long after their capacity is gone. Over time, this leads to resentment, numbness, and spiritual fatigue. None of this brings you closer to Allah. Even the Prophet, who carried the heaviest mission and the deepest compassion, did not make himself emotionally accessible to everyone at all times. He withdrew. He sought solitude. He protected moments of silence and reflection. He did not allow people unlimited emotional access to him, even though he cared deeply for the Ummah. If emotional exhaustion were a sign of piety, he would have been the most exhausted human being alive. Instead, he modeled balance. When you make yourself emotionally available to everyone, people stop taking responsibility for their own inner work. They lean on you instead of developing patience, reliance on Allah, or emotional maturity. You become the release valve for their stress, anger, and confusion. They feel lighter, while you become heavier. This imbalance is not sustainable, and Islam does not endorse imbalance. Relationships in Islam are meant to be mutual, not parasitic. Many women also confuse empathy with obligation. Feeling someone's pain does not mean you must carry it. Islam teaches compassion with boundaries. You can care without collapsing. You can support without absorbing. You can advise without rescuing. Emotional availability that costs you your peace, clarity, or worship is not noble. It is misdirected energy. When a woman limits her emotional availability, she is not abandoning people. She is teaching them to stand on their own feet, to turn to Allah, and to take responsibility for their emotional state. This is not cruelty. It is wisdom. And wisdom in Islam is more beloved than emotional excess. Protecting your emotional energy allows you to show up sincerely when it truly matters. It prevents burnout, bitterness, and spiritual dryness. A woman who understands this does not feel guilty for stepping back. She understands that her heart is an amana, not a public space. And when she guards it properly, she becomes more present, more grounded, and more aligned with the balance Allah intended for her life. 6. Being always available shifts reliance away from Allah. One of the most subtle and dangerous consequences of constant availability is that it quietly redirects reliance. When you are always present, always fixing, always responding, people begin to rely on you instead of turning to Allah. And over time, you may begin to rely on being needed in order to feel valuable. This shift is rarely intentional, but it is spiritually costly. Islam is built on Tawheed, the oneness of Allah in reliance, help, and dependence. Anything that competes with that, even emotionally, weakens the heart. Allah never intended you to be the source of stability for others. You were not created to carry burdens that belong to Him. When people know you will always be there, they delay turning to Allah. They complain to you before making dua. They seek your reassurance before seeking guidance. This may feel like trust, but it is misdirected dependence. And Islam does not reward enabling spiritual laziness, even when it looks like kindness. This dynamic harms you as well. When your sense of worth becomes tied to how needed you are, your identity shifts from servant of Allah to emotional provider for people. You begin to fear irrelevance. You feel anxious when no one reaches out. You feel guilty when you pull back. This is not humility. This is attachment. And attachment to being needed is a trap that drains Iman quietly, because your heart becomes occupied with people instead of Allah. The Quran repeatedly reminds believers to place their trust in Allah alone. That reminder is not symbolic, it is practical. It means allowing people to experience moments of discomfort that push them back toward their Creator. When you remove yourself appropriately, people are forced to make dua, reflect, and take responsibility. This is not abandonment. It is spiritual correction. Even Allah sometimes removes support to teach reliance. He withdraws comfort to awaken hearts. If divine wisdom includes withdrawal, then human wisdom must include it as well. Constant availability interferes with this process. It delays growth. It creates emotional dependency instead of spiritual strength. A woman aligned with Islamic wisdom understands that helping does not mean replacing Allah. She supports when appropriate, but she steps back when presence becomes a substitute for divine reliance. She does not compete with Allah for emotional centrality in people's lives. She redirects hearts back to Him, even if it feels uncomfortable. When you stop being always available, you reclaim your spiritual position. You remember that you are a servant, not a savior. Your value comes from obedience, not usefulness. And when reliance returns to Allah, both you and the people around you are spiritually lighter, clearer, and more aligned with the truth Islam was built upon. 7. Allah honors the woman who protects her dignity. Islam does not measure a woman's worth by how much she gives away of herself. It measures her by her taqwa, her dignity, and her obedience to Allah. Yet many women live as if approval is the currency of righteousness. They exhaust themselves trying to be liked, needed, and accepted, believing this self-erasure will earn honor. Islam teaches the opposite. Honor comes from alignment with Allah, not from availability to people. Allah is Al-Aziz, the most honored, and He grants honor to whom He wills. That honor is not found in desperation or overextension. It is found in self-respect rooted in faith. A woman who protects her dignity understands that not every demand deserves access, not every relationship deserves priority, and not every voice deserves her energy. This clarity is not arrogance. It is submission to the hierarchy Allah established, where obedience comes before approval. History shows this clearly. The women honored in Islam were not chasing validation. They were composed, principled, and selective. They served when service was right, and they withdrew when withdrawal preserved dignity. They did not dilute themselves to be palatable. They did not beg for closeness. They understood that a woman grounded in Iman does not need to make herself constantly available to be valuable. When a woman begins to protect her time, her energy, and her emotional space, something uncomfortable often happens. Weak people complain. Entitled people accuse her of changing. Manipulative people attempt guilt. This reaction is not proof of wrongdoing. It is proof that access was being taken for granted. Islam does not tell you to maintain patterns that enable disrespect just to keep peace. True peace begins with self-respect. Allah promises that whatever is left for His sake is replaced with something better. This is not poetry. It is a guarantee. When you step back from relationships that drain you, Allah replaces them with clarity. When you stop chasing approval, Allah replaces it with inner strength. When you stop making yourself endlessly available, Allah restores your sense of worth and stability. Loss in the path of Allah is never loss. It is refinement. Protecting dignity also protects Iman. Constant availability scatters the heart. Boundaries gather it. A woman who guards herself becomes calmer, more intentional, and more spiritually focused. Her worship deepens because she is no longer emotionally depleted. Her relationships improve because they are no longer built on imbalance. And her presence carries weight because it is no longer cheapened by excess access. Islam does not want women depleted, anxious, and overextended. It wants them grounded, dignified, and strong. A woman who understands this does not fear being misunderstood. She fears displeasing Allah more than disappointing people. And that fear realigns her entire life. When you protect your dignity, you are not becoming distant. You are becoming aligned. And alignment with Allah elevates a woman in ways no amount of availability ever could. Being too available was never the standard Islam set for you. It was a misunderstanding that crept in through fear, guilt, and the need for validation. Islam did not ask you to abandon yourself for others. It asked you to stand upright for Allah. The moment you make yourself endlessly accessible, people stop valuing you, not because you lack worth, but because you taught them that your time, energy, and presence had no boundaries. When you reclaim your limits, you reclaim your dignity. You stop competing for approval and start living from principle. Some people will fall away when access is no longer guaranteed. Let them. What remains will be cleaner, healthier, and more sincere. Allah does not bless what drains you. He blesses what aligns you. A woman who understands this no longer measures herself by how needed she is, but by how obedient, grounded, and at peace she feels with Allah. And when that shift happens, respect follows naturally, from people and from within.